On one June summer afternoon in Randolph County, North Carolina, 911 dispatchers received a call from the small, rural community of Seagrove. The woman on the line sounded panicked as she told the dispatcher her husband had shot himself. In the background, the operator coached her to get her husband flat on the floor so that she could begin CPR. You can hear her verbally confirming and counting with the dispatcher as she performed chest compressions and waited for the first responders to arrive. During the call, the woman explained that her stepson was home and coming toward the door. The dispatcher instructed her to stop him and redirect him to wait at the road to flag down the ambulance. She did as she was told and warned him not to come inside. "Your dad has shot himself," she said. But the 11-year-old pushed through the doorway anyway. Then his screams could be heard as he ran back outside. This call would become the beginning of an investigation into the death of M.J. Auman, a local firefighter. His wife, Heather Auman, reported that he had taken his own life, but investigators would soon begin asking whether this was really the truth. 3 years later, that question would land inside a Randolph County courtroom where jurors were asked to decide a life-altering question. Was M.J. Auman's death a tragic suicide or something else entirely? In the book of Proverbs, 18:17, it says, "The one who states his case first seems right until the other comes and examines him." In the case of M.J. Auman's death, the first story the investigators heard would not be the last.
I'm Darlene.
I'm Melody.
This is Hard Times and True Crimes. So you've had an interesting couple of weeks.
I have had an interesting couple of weeks. You know, we've talked on here about not being able to get on jury duty.
Yes.
So I just assigned myself jury duty. I spent about a week and a half sitting in the courtroom about the case that I'm going to tell you about today. I know you're familiar with it a little bit.
Yes. I'm so glad that you did that because ever since I saw that, that first article about this case, it's just been so fascinating. And of course, just, wondering how it's going to turn out. And so
I don't know if you remember this, but right after we started the podcast, you sent me a text with a link to that news story and said, "Did you hear about this?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, yes, I just saw this on the news." Do you remember that?
I think I do now. Like that,
Yes.
That is jogging my memory.
And that was before we ever recorded any episodes. So
I was very interested in it. And then, of course, living in Randolph County, I've heard a lot of rumors and, some have turned out to be fact and some not so factual. But I'm just really interested to hear all of it put together today.
Okay. Well, for those who are listening or those who heard the TikToks, I hope I tell this story for you from beginning to end, and I hope I tell it well. So let's just jump in.
Yes.
Before his name was ever spoken in a courtroom, MJ was known in the community as a firefighter. He held multiple jobs, working for the city of Asheboro, serving with both Seagrove and Eula fire departments, working in chicken houses, and doing yard work and various jobs on the side. Friends and family described him as someone who loved being outdoors and spending time with his son. Any leisure time he had was spent hunting and fishing, your typical Randolph County good old boy.
Yeah, I was thinking that. I'm like, he sounds like everybody's cousin and brother.
Yes. And as is the case with most of us, his life had its complications. But to the people who knew him best, he was first and foremost a father, a son, and a brother. Mm. His workmates described him as personable, a jokester at times, wide open, and just generally a happy person. People just liked him.
Yeah.
And he's a nice looking guy too.
I thought so too. I always just thought he was so cute.
He was. MJ began a relationship with Heather Hicks sometime between 2017 and 2018. And the two eventually built a life together as a blended family.
Do you know how they met?
No, but maybe some of our listeners would, comment in our group and tell us.
Yeah, I've always been curious.
I will say this.
That relationship started.
I don't know exactly how they met, but there was a connection between the families, and I'm getting ready to tell you what that is here in just a minute. And I don't know if that's how they met.
Okay.
By the summer of 2022, MJ was just shy of his 38th birthday, and Heather had recently turned 37. Their connection was unusual in one way. Heather's sister, Courtney, was best friends with MJ's ex-wife, Crystal.
Okay.
And in a small community, their lives had intersected long before their relationship began.
Yeah.
By the time of MJ's death, the couple had been married just shy of 2 years, but had been together for about 5. Now, Heather didn't have kids of her own, but she did become involved in co-parenting MJ's son, Owen. The blended family was not without its problems, though. MJ and Crystal shared 50-50 custody, and Heather was included in a text chain with them where they discussed things like Owen's grades, birthday plans, kind of things like that. As long as it was in Owen's best interest, Crystal was okay with this. However, she did not always agree with Heather's strict parenting style, and that became a source of friction at times. She said as long as it was in her son's best interest, she could go along with stuff. When it came to someone who was trying to call the shots over and above what she and MJ were agreeing on, then she had a problem with it.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Yeah. There was also tension between Heather and Owen. It seemed that each time it was MJ's turn to have Owen, he and Heather would end up fussing and fighting. And there may have been a little bit of jealousy over the bond between MJ and Owen.
Okay. So you're saying Owen and Heather argued, or MJ and Heather were arguing?
Both.
Okay.
Yes. Heather and Owen, they kind of butted heads, especially as he became a little older. Mm-hmm. And then when he was around, it seemed like Heather and MJ fought a lot more, and it was usually over him.
Gotcha. And honestly, that's not that unusual, unfortunately.
Probably not uncommon.
Yeah.
And by the summer of 22, those tensions had begun to surface more and more. Heather frequently accused MJ of cheating on her, too. And so their arguments had been growing more intense. The strain between them had just become palpable. June 25th, 2022, started like any other Saturday. MJ had worked overnight at the Eula Fire Department. He came in that Saturday morning, ready to get going. The family planned to go to Baden Lake to take the boat out, do a little fishing, maybe some swimming. It was Owen's week to be with his dad, so he had stayed at the house overnight along with Heather and her nephew Jackson. The boys knew each other well because, as I mentioned before, Courtney and Crystal, which are their moms, were close friends.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So is that connection kind of a little bit more clear?
Yes. So they're friends then, the boys?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
When MJ arrived home that morning, Heather and the boys were supposed to already be getting ready and loading things onto the boat, and instead they had slept in a little longer than planned, and they were kind of moving slow. And accounts differ on exactly how MJ reacted, but there was clearly some tension between him and Heather that morning.
About the boys about them not being ready?
Well, it depends on who you ask what it was about.
Okay.
The two had argued the day before because Heather had found a condom in MJ's pocket.
Okay.
And to her, that was proof that he had been cheating. The discovery was especially upsetting because Heather had been trying to get pregnant and even had plans to visit a fertility clinic.
Okay.
Despite the tension, the four of them, MJ, Heather, 11-year-old Owen, and 9-year-old Jackson, headed out to the lake. They stopped at Hardee's for breakfast, and then they made another stop to gas up the truck, and then they drove on down. But once they arrived at the lake, the mood didn't improve. Instead of settling into a relaxed day on the water, the tension between MJ and Heather simmered until it reached its boiling point. The boys were horseplaying in the water, while MJ floated nearby, eyes closed, resting. According to Jackson, Heather told him to throw some water on MJ. But when he tried to do so, Owen intervened. Owen says that he smacked the cup out of Jackson's hand, while Jackson later said Owen grabbed his life jacket and dunked him under a few times. So a little bit of a variance.
I mean, either way.
Could have been both.
Kids, yeah, and that's...
We don't know yet.
Yeah.
Whatever version of this story occurred, it angered Heather. She admitted that she yelled at Owen to keep his hands to himself, and then Owen argued back, and according to her, he cussed at her and called her a nasty name.
Oh.
Now, disagreements, like I said, between the two were not unusual, but this one escalated when Heather attempted to hit Owen, and he jumped off the boat to avoid her. Later,
Okay.
Yeah.
Now that's a little,
Well, later, when MJ helped him back onto the boat, Owen sat down, but Heather came over and struck him across the face. Hard. And even that was in her own words, hard.
So because of that, she went over there and just slapped him in the face?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not okay.
No. And that was the last straw. MJ was done. According to Heather, MJ pulled off his wedding band, threw it into the lake, and said, "We're through."
Yeah, I can see that.
So the boat belonged to Heather, and after the argument, she told Jackson, "Come on, let's go." And they took off and left MJ and Owen in the water, and they drove off on the boat. Within a few minutes, they had returned. They circled around them in the water.
Okay, wait. So, because there's one thing that I don't understand. So they had gotten back into the boat and then gotten back out of the boat?
Yeah, at some point they must have gotten back into the water.
Gotten back into the water.
I'm sorry, I probably should have said that.
No, that's okay.
And I don't know at what point that was, because honestly, there are like 3 different variations of this story. You have Owen's take, and you have Jackson's take, and you have Heather's take.
Right.
And so this is a compilation of those 3 stories.
Okay.
So, but at some point, MJ and Owen were back in the water, and Heather and Jackson left on the boat. And then they came back and kind of circled around them. Okay. And then eventually she did let MJ and Owen back on the boat. The lake trip was effectively over. They headed back towards shore, but the arguing continued over who would drive the boat back and how fast they were going and who would back the trailer down the ramp. Just all the things.
Oh, gosh.
And then after they got everything loaded up, they headed home. On the way home, they stopped to drop Jackson off at Heather's parents' house, where he lived with his mother, Courtney. They lived with her parents. And Heather went inside with Jackson.
Okay.
While they were inside, MJ and Owen began trying to unhook her boat. They were going to leave that boat there, and possibly Heather with it.
Right.
But before they could finish, Heather came back out yelling at them. And she insisted that the boat was not staying there. And she got back into the truck.
We'll be back after a quick break.
All right, y'all. Real quick before we get back to it. Because you keep asking, yes, we finally have podcast merch. We've got hoodies with a new design. Cozy, super comfy, and honestly, way nicer than we planned, for just $35. Fair warning, though, we only have sizes 2X and 3X left. But let's be honest, that oversized fit is very on trend right now, and perfect for cool mornings or porch sitting. Prefer a more fitted look? We have t-shirts in all sizes for just $20 each. Same vibe, same attitude. Grab yours, rep the show, and help support what we're building. To order, just email us at hardtimesandtruecrimes@gmail.com with what you want, your size, and your shipping address. That's hardtimesandtruecrimes@gmail.com. Now, back to the show.
But why would you want to, after an argument that big, just stay and cool off and let them go?
I bet she wishes now that that's exactly what she had done.
I'm sure.
The 3 of them continued home, speaking very little the rest of the drive. Once they arrived back at the house, MJ and Owen unhooked the boat this time. The plan was they were going to go into town and pick up another pair of Crocs for Owen, because when they were at the boat scuffling during that time, he had a new pair of Crocs and he lost one.
Okay.
So his dad was going to take him to the store, get him another pair, and then take him and drop him off at his grandparents' house, his mother's parents.
Okay.
But once again, Heather came outside and asked to tag along, and MJ told her, "No, you're not going." And that caused another argument. Actually, it was the same argument. It was just continuing, basically. But nonetheless, the 3 of them ended up going back into the house. They just got out of the truck and went back in.
Why didn't they just go?
I'm not sure, and that question did come up. For whatever reason.
Me and Curtis will have some serious because I don't, if I got something to say, I'll say it. And I'll be like, I'm sorry. And he's like, I'm leaving. I'm going to the store. I'm going. And I'll be like, no, just stay here. And he's like, no, I'm going.
He's like, I'm not going to put up with this.
Yeah.
So this is where the story really begins to differ depending on who's telling it. Okay. Heather said that Owen had already gone outside when MJ went into the bedroom and shut the door.
Okay.
She said he came back out a few minutes later and sat down on the couch. And then she sat down beside of him. And then she claimed he pulled out her .38 Special and said, I'm sick and tired of this, and shot himself right in front of her.
Huh.
But Owen told investigators something very different. And just as we said Proverbs 18 suggested, the first version of a story can seem convincing.
Right.
Until another voice steps forward.
Sure.
At first glance, Heather's story sounded straightforward. A man upset about his marriage had taken his own life. But as investigators began asking questions, and as Owen shared what he remembered, another version of that day started to emerge. Owen said Heather went to the bedroom, and that he and his dad heard a clicking sound coming from inside, like the cylinder of a gun being spun, or a hammer being caught. Then MJ sent him outside to feed his chickens. Outside, Owen heard the shot. Scared at first, he ran down through the yard away from the house. Owen had run to the neighbor's house, telling them to call 911 for help. Right when he heard the shot, when he came back up through the yard, he ran to the neighbors saying, we need help, call 911. And then deputies later found him in the neighbor's carport, and they brought him to sit in a patrol car.
That breaks my heart.
Oh, I know. It really does. Inside the house, Heather picked up her phone and made a call. Not to 911, but first to her father. That call lasted 1 minute and 37 seconds. Only after that did she call 911 and report that her husband had shot himself. The 911 operator could be heard asking Heather if she could get MJ to the floor so she could perform CPR. She also asked if the gun was nearby. When Heather said it was beside of him, the operator instructed her to use a cloth and carefully move the gun out of the way. Heather moved MJ to the floor, and the operator began coaching her through chest compressions, counting along with her while they waited for help to arrive. Heather then told the dispatcher that MJ's son was trying to come in the door, and the operator instructed her to tell him not to come in, but instead go to the road at the end of the driveway and flag down the ambulance. Heather called out to him, "Don't come in, your dad has shot himself."
Oh my gosh.
And she told him to go flag down the ambulance. But Owen pushed the door open and looked inside.
Oh my gosh.
Later, we learned that he saw his father lying on the floor with blood coming from his mouth and nose. Mm-hmm. On the recording, his screams can be heard as he ran back outside.
Oh my gosh.
That is heartbreaking. The 911 call lasted for approximately 10 minutes. Once the first responders arrived, they began rotating every 2 minutes, performing chest compressions and administering CPR in an attempt to stabilize MJ. During this time, Heather stepped outside and sat on the porch. She was coughing, dry heaving, and crying. One of MJ's friends, David Poole, had also arrived at the scene. Just 20 minutes earlier, he had spoken with MJ on the phone. When he saw the service call for that address pop up on his phone, he thought, I think that's MJ's address. Yeah. And he just jumped in his truck and ran over there to check. And then when he got there, he realized, it was his. David joined the responders and took part in the rotations of the chest compressions.
Oh, gosh.
And then at one point, he stepped outside and asked Heather what had happened. According to him, she responded, "We've been arguing and he goes and does this."
Wow.
One of the first officers to arrive on the scene was Lieutenant Cox from the Randolph County Sheriff's Department, along with Deputy Kearns. Deputy Kearns invited Heather to sit in his car where it was cooler. Mm-hmm. The AC was going, and it's like, this is June, pretty hot.
Yeah.
And just give her a chance to kind of calm down. Before she got in, he offered her wet wipes to clean her hands, which were covered in blood from doing the chest compressions.
I hate that.
I know. Don't you know? The whole sheriff's department hates that. She wiped her hands and then sat in the patrol car where she remained for quite some time. While sitting there, Heather spoke with Deputy Kearns about what had just happened. On the body cam footage, Heather told him that at the lake earlier that day, Owen had been bullying her nephew. She admitted that she had popped him in the face hard. Owen was cussing and talking back to her, and she claimed that he called her a racial slur. She said that she had apologized to Owen on the way home for hitting him, but had told him she didn't appreciate being disrespected like that. And this is when she told the officer that the argument had started that day because she had found a condom in MJ's pocket. Mm. During this time, on the body cam footage, Heather's father approached the patrol car. He spoke to her briefly, and then in the video, he can be heard referring to Owen as a spoiled brat. Shortly afterwards, officers stopped allowing Heather to speak with anyone else until the detectives could get a statement from her. Heather sat with her elbows on her knees, her head in her hands, sniffling, crying. She could be heard saying things like, "I've never been through anything like this." At one point, the video was muffled, but she appeared to say something about divorce, and then that's what he wanted, but it was hard to hear everything she said. When Lieutenant Cox entered the home, he observed MJ lying on his back with his head toward the couch and feet toward the door. On the back of the couch was a blood stain where the bullet had exited the back of MJ's head. Someone asked, and I'm not sure if this was an EMT or another officer, but somebody there asked Lieutenant Cox if they could move that gun because they needed to be able to perform life-saving measures. Mm-hmm. Normally, the firearm would have been left not moved.
Right.
But MJ was still breathing, and saving his life took priority.
Of course.
However, before they moved it, Lieutenant Cox had Deputy Kearns use his body cam to photo and video them, carefully picking it up by just 2 fingers.
Right.
They got a picture of where it was on the floor, and they unloaded it, and they placed that and the shells into evidence envelopes.
Okay.
Which then were put in Deputy Kearns' car. The weapon was a Smith & Wesson .38 Special 5-shot revolver. 1 round had been fired. The body cam footage of 11-year-old Owen that day shows a child who is clearly traumatized and just trying to process what had happened. He was talking about how much he loved his dad, all the things they did together, the hunting, the fishing. Owen told officers a different version of events that differed from Heather's. Mm-hmm. He said that when they had arrived home and that when MJ wouldn't allow Heather to go buy the shoes, that they all had gone back in. And according to Owen, it was Heather, not his dad, who went to the bedroom. He said MJ was sitting on the couch when Heather went into the bedroom.
Did he know what Heather had said before he said that, or he was just given his statement?
He was just talking about this in the patrol car. After he went outside and that shot was fired, the only thing spoken between him and Heather was when he came up through the yard and went in and saw his dad, and then they never spoke to each other after that, he and Heather.
Okay, so the cop didn't say, no, this is what she says.
No, absolutely
not.
not.
Well, that's very interesting.
Absolutely not, yeah. He said MJ was sitting on the couch and Heather went into the bedroom and he heard a gun noise from the room, like a cylinder, was how he described it. Then his dad sent him out to feed the chickens. And it was while he was outside that he heard the shot.
But I wonder if he thought that she was going to shoot herself and that's why he sent him outside.
I personally believe that. I think that is why MJ sent him outside.
Yeah.
We don't know what he thought, really.
Yeah.
But in my mind, that's what I have thought from the beginning of this, hearing all these details.
Okay.
It's unclear whether the discrepancy between Owen's and Heather's versions is what raised suspicions for the officers, but soon the area was limited by crime scene tape. Now, Lieutenant Cox testified that at this time it was still being considered a self-inflicted shot, and that taped off area was not because it was considered a crime scene, but they were just trying to limit access while they were processing everything.
Gotcha.
One of the more striking moments of the body cam footage happened while Owen sat in the patrol car. The deputy was not actively questioning him, and he was actually trying to distract him with other conversation, trying to get his mind off of it. But Owen just kept returning to what had happened, and he repeated two things several times: that he does not believe his daddy would have done this, and that he thinks Heather had something to do with it.
Wow.
At one point, he began asking questions of his own. Had they found the gun? Where was it? Had they found the cartridge? Where had they found it? Where exactly had his dad been shot? It was clear that his mind was trying to piece together those events. And in his mind, the pieces just did not line up with suicide.
Wow.
Yeah. During his time spent in the patrol car, he says that my daddy would not do that because he knows I would not want him to.
Oh, that breaks my heart.
Yeah. He says, I know it's not my daddy. I can guarantee that.
Wow.
And
he's in shock, and he's still trying to process everything.
Absolutely. This one broke my heart. He said, I knew I shouldn't have left my daddy. I should have stayed in the house. And then he said, sometimes I don't want to trust her.
Wow.
If she just admits it, it'll be easier for me, I guess.
Wow.
He even asked the deputy, will I have to go to court? In fact, he would be the first witness to testify on day 5 of the trial. Eventually, MJ was transported by ambulance to Randolph Hospital, where he later died. The local medical examiner was called to the hospital. As part of the normal process, she began documenting the body and trying to locate the gunshot wound. However, she initially had trouble identifying the entry wound because MJ's face was covered with blood. She could clearly see the exit wound in the back of his head, but not the entry wound.
Okay.
And as she carefully cleaned the blood away from his face, she eventually located it on the right side of his face next to his nose. That location struck her as an unusual spot for a self-inflicted gunshot.
Yeah.
There was another surprising discovery as well. While examining MJ's body, she found another firearm in his waistband on his right hip toward the back. His personal .380 handgun. It was not the weapon that had been used to shoot him.
So Heather's gun was used to shoot him.
Yes. And his was still on him.
That's weird. That's very suspicious.
That is weird. MJ's body was later released to the funeral home. In the days following the shooting, the sheriff's department received a number of letters from MJ's friends and coworkers expressing their suspicions about the circumstances of his death and things that they knew about MJ and Heather's relationship. What had initially been reported as a suicide was now being investigated as a possible homicide. Detective Brittany Beck was appointed as the lead detective. She had arrived at the home shortly after the 911 call. At that time, she performed a presumptive gunshot residue test on Heather's hands and the discarded wipes that she had used to clean them with, as well as on MJ's hands.
Okay.
I will reveal those findings to you a little later in the story. On June 27th, 2 days later, officers asked Heather to come to the sheriff's office for an interview, and she agreed. During the interview, Heather gave explanations that conflicted with some of her earlier statements.
Okay, I didn't know about that.
She described the shooting by saying that MJ had been holding her gun concealed by his side after he had come out of that bedroom. According to her, he said, I can't do this anymore, then brought the gun up from his knee, turned it toward himself, and then fired it from that position toward his face.
That makes no sense.
Well, you're not the only person that thinks that. Investigators also found that explanation unusual. Before leaving the interview, Heather agreed to let investigators take her phone, and she signed paperwork giving them permission to examine it.
Okay.
Detective Beck continued her investigation. From the scene, she had collected MJ's phone, keys, and the projectile recovered from the home, that condom wrapper, the discarded wipes that Heather had cleaned her hands with, and MJ's personal firearm that had been discovered at the hospital.
So it was a condom wrapper, not like an open condom?
Yes, it was a wrapper.
Okay.
On June 29th, 2022, Heather Hicks Auman was arrested and charged with first-degree murder of Michelle James Auman. She was taken to jail without bond. In February of 2023, her attorneys requested that she be granted a low bond. Instead, the court set the bond at $1 million secured. The requirements of that bond were that she live with her parents in Davidson County and wear an ankle monitor and give up her passport. Then, just a few weeks ago, her case went to trial.
Now, has she been able to go out and stuff as long as she's with her family?
Yeah, she had that ankle monitor on, and she had to report in whenever it would start beeping, and so she would have to report in.
Okay.
It actually started beeping in the courtroom, and the jury happened to not be in there at the time. Her lawyers very quickly asked the judge if he would sign for her to have it removed because they didn't want it to go off during trial and the jury to hear that and maybe prejudice them against her. Since she had shown up for trial, the state was okay with that. And so the very first day of trial, they did actually have that removed at the end of the day.
Okay.
So I was able to attend each day of the trial. And of course, I posted those daily recaps to their TikTok. And the amount of information that was presented in court was extensive.
I'm sure.
And I'm trying not to be redundant in this story as I tell it. There were multiple versions of events, numerous expert witnesses, and a great deal of ballistic and forensic testimony. During the opening arguments, the prosecution laid out their theory that the couple's troubled marriage, the argument that very morning, and Heather's suspicions that MJ was cheating had pushed Heather over the edge. According to the state, she shot MJ with her own gun and claimed he had shot himself. The defense argued the opposite, that while Heather had her faults, and they did say, you're going to hear some things about Heather. She wore her heart on her sleeve and she didn't hold back on what she said. She was just like that. And you're going to hear some bad things that she's done. They admitted that. But they said while she had those faults, MJ was the one who had reached his breaking point and ultimately took his own life. They argued that the case was built entirely on circumstantial evidence, but there was a lot of it.
Okay.
One early revelation during testimony was that this was not the first time 911 had been called to the home for a suspected suicide. In October of 2021, MJ had called 911 himself and told the operator he believed his wife was trying to kill herself. He reported that she had left the house with a gun and he had heard a gunshot. When officers arrived, they searched the area with dogs that were trained to track armed individuals. Suddenly, Heather appeared in the driveway. She told officers that she had simply been out walking down the road to cool off because they had had an argument. When they questioned if she had a gun, she denied that. She also denied having the intent to harm herself or the intent to harm others. But MJ told officers he had seen her leave with the gun. And she insisted, no, that's just my cell phone. And then MJ said, well, I heard a shot. And Heather insisted, well, that might have been the neighbors. They shoot all the time out here. MJ said, did you put the gun in the Jeep? And she replied, well, if it's there, then that's where it's at.
Wow. So there's like a history there with pulling out guns.
Definitely a history.
Okay.
Definitely a history. Officers didn't leave that night until they were sure that one or the other of them was leaving for the night. I believe Heather stayed with her parents that night. At first, MJ was going to leave, and then he got back out and they were discussing things. And then I believe Heather was the one who left and went and stayed at her parents' house. But again, okay. I heard a couple variations of that story, and I'm not sure which one was the actual one, but I believe it was that one.
Okay.
During that discussion, MJ did tell the officers that Heather's crazy.
Wow. What a miserable marriage.
Yes. For both of them.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
Even both sides acknowledged that this relationship was just so full of turmoil that they were like oil and water.
Yeah.
And they really that relationship should have never happened.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
After that incident in October, MJ gathered most of their guns and he asked his sister to keep them for a while because, quote, Heather's gone crazy. He also asked a coworker to hold on to some of his guns and fishing rods for safekeeping.
Wow.
Later, when he collected the guns from his sister, he told her that he and Heather were working through it.
Okay.
MJ's brother Trenton took the stand and he described his relationship with MJ. This was a close family. They lived within minutes of each other. They spent time going to each other's homes, birthday party, kind of like your family does.
Yeah.
Y'all were always doing things together. This family was similar to that.
Okay.
And Trenton said that in the time leading up to the shooting, MJ had talked about buying a camper because Heather had refused to leave the house. MJ had been discussing his marriage problems with Trenton for at least a year at that point.
So he was just ready for it to be over?
Yes, he told her to leave several times. Trenton also revealed that MJ had once hosted a concealed carry class at his home. Heather attended the class and participated in the shooting practice at the end. This was notable because Heather had suggested to investigators that she was afraid of guns. Testimony from multiple witnesses indicated that she had hunted deer before, killed deer before, and was comfortable handling firearms.
Okay.
Several witnesses also testified that Heather frequently called MJ's family or friends, asking them to intervene in their marriage problems. In one instance, when she couldn't reach MJ by phone because he wasn't answering her, she became convinced that he was meeting with a divorce lawyer and asked his sister to call him to find out if that's where he was.
Gosh.
It gets worse. Multiple friends and co-workers testified about things that MJ had told them regarding physical altercations during arguments. One said that MJ told him Heather had kicked him so hard in the bed that it left a bruise on his leg. Another said that she threw a handful of gravel at him one time, leaving multiple marks on his body.
Oh my gosh.
More than one witness said they had seen the bandages on MJ's shoulder where he claimed Heather had stabbed him with a fork.
Good night.
Other testimony described additional incidents. Heather allegedly ripping a handful of chest hair from MJ's chest and striking him with a broom at different times.
That's so sad. Sounds like he was kind of in a domestic violence situation himself.
It almost does sound that way. And I do think, it's harder for a man to admit that.
Yeah.
You don't want people giving you a hard time about that. But it does kind of sound like that.
It does. And I think another thing I just keep thinking about is that he obviously wanted away from her, but it was almost like he was powerless. Like he didn't want her to go back home with them that night.
Right.
He didn't want her to go with the store with them, but
yeah,
she seemed like had the power. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. For some reason or another, he kept letting her come back and insert herself into the situation.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm just curious about that. Like,
and I don't want to paint him. Maybe there was some altercations from both sides.
Sure.
I'm not saying that he was just like an abused man, but there was obviously a lot of physical activity on her part.
Were they hitting each other?
Well, I mean, again, in this trial, there were no witnesses that came up and said that he had done the same to her. Let me just put it that way. Again, I don't know what happens behind closed doors. Her ripping the chest hair from him. Later on, the defense does suggest that he actually had her on the ground and was holding her down when she did that. They suggest that that's how it happened.
Okay, but they didn't come out and say it, or...
This was in trial testimony, so I guess if you don't have a witness who can say that, you can't say it as a fact.
I gotcha.
Like they questioned a witness and said, did MJ ever say that in that incident where she ripped the chest hair out, that it was because he was holding her down on the ground? And they said, no, he didn't say that.
Now, if she would have ripped that chest hair out and then he would have put her on the ground, I could have 100% understood that.
Absolutely. and again, we don't know, but I mean, that's rough.
That's rough. Yeah.
Yeah. His employer testified that once MJ requested a flip phone for work instead of a smartphone because Heather tracked him. She had an app that she tracked him with, and he just didn't want her to have that app.
My gosh.
I mean, she appeared to be very controlling and jealous.
Yeah.
You know how I feel about them tracker apps. I'm like, anybody who's going to do that to me, it's just like over the top.
Crazy.
That's crazy behavior.
It really is. And if you if you don't trust your spouse that much, I mean, it's probably time to go on and sever ties. If you're fully convinced that they're cheating on you. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's my very next statement is in her own words. In one of her texts, she wrote, "I'm terrified you're going to cheat on me."
I mean, so she didn't think he was. She just was I don't know. I'm just so
Well, probably by this point, because that text was older. Probably
Okay.
by this point, when she found that wrapper, she probably thought he was, and maybe he was. I don't know.
Let me tell you, if I found a condom wrapper in my husband's pants too, I'd probably be.
I would think that too.
I would think that too. I would show my butt. I'm gonna tell you that right now.
Yeah. One friend testified that MJ told him that Heather said she would leave if he would give her $30,000. And his friend said, well, then let's go to the bank.
Wow.
I mean, that's a good friend.
They wanted him to be.
Yes, his friends and family, I think, knew
Read of
the
that.
situation way better than you or I do sitting here talking about it. And they wanted him out too. During cross-examination, the defense attempted to present a different perspective on some of these incidents. That's what I was saying earlier. Her defense team also suggested that MJ had cheated on his ex-wife, the mother of his son, or that at least she had suspected he had. They also questioned whether Heather had been upset because MJ refused to leave work when she was experiencing a miscarriage. Heather had suffered more than one miscarriage, and the couple had planned to, we had talked about, visit a fertility clinic shortly
In the midst of all that, they were going to visit a fertility clinic?
Yes, but later MJ did text her and say that she needed to leave and they did not need a kid.
Yeah.
So he saw that writing on the wall. Another sore spot in the marriage involved finances and property. Most of the assets, including the house, were in MJ's name only. The home, I think, had belonged to him before she moved in and before they were married. He reportedly told others that he needed to ensure he had a place to raise his son. Actually, I think I heard that on the body cam when the police were at the house during that October visit.
Okay.
And his life insurance listed Owen as the beneficiary. Heather was not included.
Okay. I mean, clearly he saw that they had a volatile relationship that might not pan out.
And she should have just left.
Yes.
I see this person trying to cling on and hold on to something that,
It's like she can't let go.
yeah, but the fact is she needed to see that you don't have him anyway.
Right.
So move on. And like, it was very toxic.
And I feel like in situations like that, but whether it be the man or the woman, if you can just walk away, you walk away with your dignity.
Yeah.
And when you just cling like that, you lose all dignity. And by the end of it, they end up hating you.
And I would guess it probably had gotten to that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Testimony from MJ's nurse, who had treated him for about a year prior to his death, became particularly important. On the stand, she stated that MJ first came to see her complaining of chest discomfort and anxiety related to troubles in his marriage. Now, this is somebody that his employer, you go to the doctors that your employers provide through the city.
Yes.
And so this person also knew him as a workmate.
Okay.
She's treated him as his nurse, but she knew him. And so he did confide in her about his marriage troubles. He told her some of those things Heather had done. She herself testified to some of this physical altercations that MJ told her about. And she ended up describing Prozac for him and Xanax as needed. During his initial appointment, MJ had indicated on the intake paperwork that he was not having suicidal thoughts. During later visits, he reported that he felt the meds were helping, and his mental health self-evaluation form indicated that his mood had improved significantly. The prescriptions appeared to be getting filled, leading the nurse to believe that he was taking his meds as he told her. And what he had told her was he was taking the Prozac on most days, but not every day. Heather's defense team did ask the nurse to confirm that she had discussed the potential side effects of the medication with MJ, including the risk of suicidal thoughts, and she confirmed that she had. However, based on MJ's behavior and progress during his visits, she said she had not been concerned about any suicide risks.
Yeah.
Text messages between MJ and Heather were introduced at the trial, and they revealed deep insecurity in the relationship, which we've already determined that.
Right.
During arguments, Heather often shifted into self-blaming statements, such as, I guess, it's all my fault, and I'm so mean to your son, and things like that.
Like, was she being sarcastic or?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then at other times, the tone would shift, and she would shift everything on the MJ. He would say, "You don't trust me." And she'd say, "Well, if you wouldn't talk to other women all the time, that kind of thing." It was always his fault. I know I said it before a minute ago about being toxic. I know people throw around that word toxic a lot, but this right here is the epitome of toxic.
Sounds very toxic.
But as we know, all of that is not enough to convict someone of murder.
No.
The state still needed evidence.
Yes.
Investigators then turned to forensic evidence.
Okay.
Experts explained that if a gun is fired at close range, particularly when pressed against the skin or shot within a few inches away, it leaves behind soot, which is like burned gunpowder, and stippling, which is unburned gunpowder when it strikes the skin, and it leaves kind of like an abrasion on your skin. Now, soot can be wiped away, but stippling cannot because it's an abrasion.
Okay.
Multiple witnesses, some of them expert witnesses, testified that neither soot nor stippling was observed on MJ's face. Even the defense's own expert witness acknowledged there was no stippling present on the face, as should be expected with a close gunshot wound.
But she's saying that he shot from his knee.
This is true. We'll talk about it in a minute.
So initially, I'm sorry, and you can take this out. Initially, when they were at the house, she didn't say he shot from the knee, though, right? She wound up changing that story. Is that correct?
I don't think she changed her story. I just don't think she had explained it in that much of a detail.
Got you.
I'm not sure when she first said that, if it was in the car on the body cam or if it was later in her interrogation.
I think you said during her interrogation.
Okay. The assistant chief medical examiner for the state testified there was no stippling on the skin, nor did he find soot inside the wound, as would be expected if it was a close shot.
Right.
The absence of stippling indicated the shot would have most likely been shot from more than 3 feet away. In his expert opinion, that was a homicide.
Okay.
He also testified that in over 200 suicide cases that he had examined, he had never seen a suicide that was a shot to the face next to the nose area.
Okay.
3 other professionals, including the local medical examiner, the funeral director, and the lead detective, also testified that in all of their experiences with suicides, none had seen a suicide shot to that area.
Okay.
And never do you imagine somebody putting a gun on their knee and turning the hand toward themselves and firing with their arm outstretched.
It just doesn't even seem possible.
Right. Those gunshot residue tests that were done by the detective, the presumptive ones early on, those were only presumptive tests. There was gunshot residue found on MJ's hands, both of them. She testified that it was only a small amount, just like a few specks, less than what would normally be expected. And she did send that kit on for further testing for a full analysis.
Okay.
At the lab, that full test, they did not conduct one on Heather's hand test because their policy was not, if her hand's already been wiped, then their policy is you don't test that.
Gotcha.
The results from MJ's hands were positive for gunshot residue. And because residue was found on both hands, the analyst explained that could happen in several ways. It could be from firing a gun, but it could be from just being in close proximity to a gun being fired, being shot at, and maybe putting your hands up in a defensive gesture.
Okay.
They're not saying he did that. They're saying it could have been. Or even handling a firearm earlier. Any of those things. Handling his own firearm, he could have had gunshot residue on his hands. So they just made it clear. They're not saying this is definitively what happened. They're only saying that these are possible explanations for him having it on both hands. And ultimately, she said she couldn't determine whether MJ or Heather, either one, had fired a gun that day. She could only speak on the presence or absence of gunshot residue.
Sure.
And so those were the results of that. No residue was found on the discarded wipes that Heather had wiped her hands with. And although the analyst explained that those wipes had been wet and then they had dried out, and by the time that testing was done, any of that residue could have fallen off of the wipes. So again, we don't know.
Right.
The firearm itself was tested for fingerprints and DNA. No fingerprints were found on the gun.
That's interesting to me.
I found that interesting too.
And I wonder if she could have possibly washed her hands after. I mean, she called her dad.
That's true. Oh, so she would have had to picked up her phone.
Yeah.
Like maybe if she had blood on her hands, would she have left blood on her phone when she picked it up? Or would she have washed her hands?
Right. I'm just very curious about all that.
I don't know. I'm curious about that too now that you bring it up.
Yeah.
I wonder if there was blood on her phone or if her phone was clean.
Or if she didn't start doing the compressions until she got on the phone with 911, and that would have been after the phone call.
Oh, and she had laid the phone down?
Yes.
Yeah.
But what I'm thinking is if she told her dad and her dad was like, go wash your hands.
Oh.
Because didn't you hear him ask her if she had any gunpowder on her hands?
Yes.
I just thought that was an interesting
And she said, well, I had to move the gun.
Right.
In the 911 call, the 911 operator tells her to move that gun. She says, get a cloth and pick that gun up and move it.
Oh, I bet she got that cloth.
And that there was a cloth found there. Okay. Even though she told them that she didn't pick, that she said she had picked it up without the cloth, but there was a towel there.
Oh, because she thought her fingerprints was going to be on that gun. She didn't know if she had wiped them good enough.
That's what I think.
Okay.
Okay.
There is a lot of circumstantial evidence.
Yeah. No fingerprints found on the gun. Testing of the grip and the cylinder release showed MJ's DNA. But his blood was all over the gun. So that could explain his DNA easily on the gun.
Okay.
The trigger was tested. What they found on the trigger was they had 2 DNA test results, and only one was interpretable. They called it a partial.
Okay.
It showed that there was DNA from 2 individuals, and one of them was MJ.
Okay.
The other contributor could not be identified.
Oh my gosh.
So investigators couldn't determine whether that DNA belonged to Heather or someone else.
Okay.
They did explain, DNA can remain on an object for a very long period of time. So even if he had fired that gun weeks or even months earlier, his DNA could still be there.
Right.
In the end, the DNA evidence could not determine who fired the gun. Heather couldn't be included or excluded as a contributor.
Okay.
Firearms and ballistics expert also conducted testing with the same model revolver. He fired that weapon at various distances, and he examined the patterns of residue. Based on the absence of soot or residue on MJ's shirt, he concluded that the shot was likely fired from at least 24 inches away because there was none of that soot on his shirt. And then there was the matter of MJ and Heather's text exchanges. We touched on it a little bit earlier. Mm-hmm. The jury saw text going back as far as 2021 and continuing up into the date of MJ's death. Here's a few snippets. Her, I need help. I admit I need medicine or something. Him, you can go. I don't think we need a kid. I told that one earlier.
Yes.
And her response to that, do you love me anymore? Her, if you cheat on me, you will see a side of crazy you had no idea existed. And another time, her, you better not cheat on me. And him, no.
Wow.
Him, I wouldn't cheat. And her response, you better not if you want to go on living.
Wow.
Her, why do you always have to lie to me? Those are just snapshots in no particular order.
Wow.
And then in addition to that, there was the Google searches. On the day before his death, there was a search for gunshot Ruger LC9 versus EC9, and then other searches with variations of that search.
Is that what he was shot with?
He was shot with a Smith & Wesson .38 Special.
Okay.
On the evening that he died, there was a search for Magnum condom. I know. I'm like, I don't know what she was looking up, though, about that.
I don't either.
2 days after his death, she searched, can a lawyer fight for life insurance? And does life insurance pay for a suicidal death in North Carolina? And her attorneys did point out that was not typed in until 2 days after his death. So It's not like she was, on there searching that before.
Sure.
The funeral director also testified. He believed he had observed stippling on MJ's face.
Okay.
However, during cross-examination, he acknowledged that he was not professionally trained in that area other than what he had read in textbooks, and he ultimately deferred to the medical examiner's opinion on what stippling actually was.
Okay.
Furthermore, he testified that Heather was reluctant to allow MJ's family to view his body. She wanted him buried as soon as possible. She eventually did allow his family to see him, but she herself never went to view the body.
Wow.
The defense's central argument was that MJ had reached his breaking point. And several witnesses testified MJ did not appear to be suicidal leading up to the day of his death. But the defense pointed out, well, outward appearance doesn't always reflect a person's internal struggles.
Right.
Heather herself did not end up testifying at the trial. Early on, it was unclear whether she would or not, but ultimately she chose not to. And then on day 8 of the trial, both sides delivered their closing arguments. The defense began, and they discussed once more that suicide is unexpected. They argued that when families lose someone suddenly, such as with suicide, it's natural to look for someone to blame. And in this case, they said that person was Heather. They were admonished to not let the state dehumanize Heather or cast her as the enemy for it. At one point, in earlier testimony, Owen had told officers he heard a gun being cocked when Heather was in the bedroom. We talked about that. The defense brought the revolver up to the jury and to demonstrate that it was a hammerless model and could not be cocked in the way that Owen described. And they weren't saying he was lying. They were just saying that he was young and didn't understand.
Right.
They also suggested that soot could have bled out of MJ's wound, which might explain why it was not detected. They emphasized that Heather had been cooperative with law enforcement throughout the whole investigation. And then finally, they pointed to this cut-like bruise on MJ's finger, suggesting that it was caused by him pulling that trigger. But the state responded with its own powerful argument. The prosecutor told the jury that they had heard a lot from Heather during the investigation, but what they hadn't heard was louder. They never heard her express regret at her loss.
I was thinking that. I never heard her be like, oh my God, I'm going to miss him. Like,
yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was all like, this has never happened to me before.
Right. And they said she didn't say, I'm going to, like, even when she was in the police car by herself and we can hear her sometimes saying stuff, you don't hear her saying, how am I going to live without you or anything like that. Not that she was going to miss him. Not in the interviews, not in the body cam footage, not anywhere. And they said that was very telling. And it's funny that you were thinking that because he said that in a lot of her recorded statements, she seemed to be explaining why she did it.
Wow.
Her words were justifying her decision. I caught that. My friend Juanita sat in the courtroom with me on most of those days. And at one point, I wrote her a little note on my paper and said pretty much that. Like, it sounds to me like she's explaining and justifying a murder, not that she's explaining.
Yeah, like with so much negativity, like towards his son. Who cares if he was a brat? Like, what does that have to do with this?
The statements seem misplaced. Instead of saying,
I thought so too. It was just so awkward to me with this little boy sitting in the back of a cop car who had just lost his dad, and her father coming around calling him a spoiled brat.
Yeah.
What a weird. There's a chip missing.
When she was accusing him of the cheating, that almost sounds like a justification for what you've done.
It's not saying why I would be trying to paint him as depressed, not trying to paint him as like, I'm mad at him because, he was cheating on me. His son's a brat or.
It seemed more about her instead of him.
Yes.
That's basically
like
what I'm trying to say.
Like she spent more time making her the victim.
That's it.
Than him.
I think that's what I wrote on my little note to Juanita's. Like it's almost like she's being the victim here.
Yes.
And that was it. And that seems odd and very telling.
It does. And if he was cheating on her, this is what I said to somebody the other day. I'm like, if he was cheating on her, like she would have actually been the victim. No matter how, what a jerk she was or whatever, like everybody would have felt bad for her.
Yeah.
But now,
yeah,
nobody feels bad for her because nobody deserves that.
Right. The prosecutor acknowledged that the jury had seen tears, but he argued that those tears could just as easily have been tears of someone who realized they had made a horrible mistake.
Yes.
He said tears are tears. They all look the same.
100%. Yeah. And a lot of people, they have a lot of tears for themselves.
Oh, yeah. And then he pointed out the body cam footage of MJ when police were talking to him during that October home visit. It was the only time the jury got to hear directly from MJ, he said. As he put it, Heather had taken MJ's voice away. And he argued MJ had nothing to lose by getting a divorce. He'd been divorced before. They didn't have children together. Everything was still solely in his name.
Right.
Like, why would he do this?
Right. Why would he was just about to go get Crocs with his kid at this. It just, the timing, it just doesn't make sense.
I agree. Then the prosecutor addressed something else that stood out. Heather had called her father before she called 911.
Yes.
Well, he set a timer in the courtroom, and for 1 minute and 37 seconds, the whole courtroom sat there in dead silence. And when that timer ended, he reminded the jury that MJ had been bleeding out that entire time.
And his heart was still beating, right?
Yes. Yes.
I bet that was powerful.
It was very powerful. In response to the defense's claim that MJ pulled the trigger, leaving the bruise on his finger, the prosecutor stood in front of the jury. He took the unloaded revolver and demonstrated how it fired, dry firing it several times. Click, 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 click. He then showed his own finger to the jury to demonstrate he hadn't been cut or bruised, and he pointed out that he was far less experienced with firearms than MJ had been. He ended his closing argument by telling the jury that this case involved 3 people, MJ, Heather, and Owen.
Yeah.
MJ, he said, had already paid the ultimate price for his fault, whatever those were.
That's exactly right.
And maybe Owen was a brat, as the defense painted him, he said, and maybe not. But regardless, he had already endured the worst day of his life and had lost his dad. So he's also
100%.
Yeah. And now he said it was Heather's turn to pay the piper for her part. The jury had 3 possible verdicts to consider: first-degree murder, second-degree murder, or not guilty. The jury heard both versions. They examined the evidence. And after approximately 54 minutes of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict. The courtroom was filled with MJ's family, and his friends took their seats. The judge instructed everyone that there should be no reactions to the verdict when it was read. And then the clerk stood and read the verdict. Guilty. Heather Hicks Auman was found guilty of first-degree murder of her husband, MJ Auman, and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the verdict was announced, Owen turned and glanced back at family members seated behind him, and I saw a smile on his face.
Wow.
And I remembered something Owen had said earlier in the body cam footage. He had said, if she just admits it, it'll be easier for me, I guess. Well, Heather never admitted to killing MJ, but in the end, Owen did see the justice for her killing his father.
So glad.
Yes. Heather's appeal was immediately noted, and she is presently incarcerated in the North Carolina Department of Adult Corrections. And I just hope that this episode honored MJ's life and the family who waited for years to see justice for him.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That was crazy.
Did I answer all the questions, or you still have something rumbling around in there?
No, I don't think I have any questions. I just think like reflection.
Okay, let's hear it.
I will be 100% honest about something. I don't think there was a ton of physical evidence, and I wonder if she had had better lawyers, if it would have gone that way. I do think there was a boatload of circumstantial evidence.
And it may be what I brought to you, because I had to cut this down so it wouldn't be such a long episode. Sure. And I tried to take and condense all of the ballistic evidence and just give you the results instead of all the stuff they explained in between there, which was a ton of information. But I will say the state had expert after expert after expert come up and testify on those ballistics.
Okay.
If you had heard more of the science behind it.
Right.
But I'm not that scientific, so I didn't want to try to tell it too much. But
and I wouldn't have understood probably if you would have.
I wanted to be careful that I didn't say something wrong.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I think she's guilty. I think there's enough there that
if you had been on the jury, you might not would have been able to find her guilty, but
possibly, but maybe I would have if I would have heard everything that you guys heard.
Yeah. I was sitting in that courtroom day after day after day thinking, well, I don't know that there would be enough evidence for me to say I would have to find her guilty. But during those closing arguments, there was a time where my mind shifted and thought if I was on that jury, that was it.
Okay. just what a tragedy that she just couldn't let go, or she couldn't lose, and because she not only took his life, but she definitely 100% ruined her own. But it sounds to me like she might have been a ticking time bomb. And if it hadn't been him, it may have, if his dad had not sent him out that day, I wonder, she could have,
You never
she
know.
could have, killed them all three, or just dependent on, where she was at mentally.
Yeah. True. That's true.
I hate to speculate something like that, but if she was off enough to kill him, and she obviously had a lot of animosity towards Owen. Mm-hmm. And so,
honestly, if you cannot deal with your spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend's children, then you don't need to be with them, because their children always have to come first.
They do. And it sounds like he put his son first.
And she didn't like it. And the fact is, I'm sorry, but he was supposed to be first.
Yeah, especially in a relationship where that's not his mother.
Right.
Yes,
absolutely.
He would have to be put first. Golly. And I hope there's nothing in that kid. I hope he doesn't feel any responsibility there.
I don't think he does. I think he places
not.
Responsibility squarely on her shoulders.
Where it belongs.
I think he is, this kid was wise beyond his years, let me tell you.
Wow.
If you could have listened to that whole hour of body cam footage, you could have heard he was smart.
And it sounds like he was loved, and he knew he was loved. Yes,
and he is very loved. And you could even see in the courtroom all the people who were there to support him. And
wow. And there's a confidence that comes with that,
yes.
With knowing that you're loved. And
yes.
Oh, gosh. But it still breaks my heart for him that he had to lose his dad, because it sounds like, that was like his best friend.
He said that. He said that. He was.
Makes me want to cry.
Yeah.
And again, I feel bad for her family, because you just don't expect something like that. How terrible would it be if, I have 4 children, if one of my children were to do something like that? I would love them still.
Absolutely, yes.
But it would just destroy me. It would break my heart.
Right. And her family was there in support of her. Mm-hmm. And their view of this was something quite different.
I'm sure.
And I don't want, like you said, I feel bad for them, even though they believe her and everything. I feel bad for them, and I can understand exactly why they feel the way they do.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, justice was served.
And golly, it's just such a sad case.
Yeah, it is. I think it feels more sad to us because it is local and it's new. We usually do historical cases.
Right.
So there are people still affected by alive and well.
Yeah.
And they're local. We see them in our community.
Of course.
And so it feels a little heavier, I think.
It does. Oh, those were some hard times.
Yes, they were.